අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදිසෝතයි.
Tonight, as expected, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation follows in LIOC footsteps with its own price hike. Promising signs. India and Sri Lanka ink an agreement for a 100 megawatt solar power project in Sampur. Following the rules, the central bank issues new guidelines for the repatriation of export proceeds. Aiming at the roots, national security expert calls for educational reforms to combat religious extremism.
Government is making a terrible mistake of continuing with a broken education policy. Our schools are not producing Sri Lankans. They are producing Sinhalese, Muslims and Tamils.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Saturday, the 12th of March, 2022.
සුවඳ ජැස්මින් සහ විටමින් E සාරය සමගින් Navalax White.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanai. Following hot on the heels of the recent Lanka IOC's decision, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has been given the green light for a similar price hike as of midnight last night. With that, the price of a litre of petrol has been raised between 76 to 77 rupees, while diesel saw a 55 to 95 rupee rise. After the move, bus operators are urging the government to provide them diesel at a subsidised rate or let them raise bus fares by 15%.
Following the recent fuel price hike announced by the Lanka Indian Oil Company, the Ministry of Energy has issued a gazette announcing its own hike that came into effect from midnight last night. Accordingly, the prices of petrol and diesel at CPC filling stations have been increased by almost similar levels. With that, the price of 92-octane petrol was increased by 77 rupees per litre, bringing its retail price to 254 rupees. In addition, the price of 95-octane petrol went up by 76 rupees, bringing the new price to 283 rupees. Meanwhile, the price of auto diesel was raised by 55 rupees per litre to 176 rupees. Super diesel was thereby raised by 95 rupees per litre and will now cost 254 rupees. Many economists had been calling on the government to increase the price of fuel to reflect the international market. They were also saying that selling fuel below the cost to customers is simply unsustainable. Speaking on the CPC fuel price hike, its chairman Sumit Vijayasinghe explains that the price hike was necessary in order to prevent almost 26 billion rupees in losses in the month of March alone.
ආනයන මිලත් සමග ගලපලා අපි විකුණු මිලත් එක්ක සලකා බැලුවා නම් අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම මාර්තු මාසය තුල පමණක් රුපියල් බිලියන 26ක අලාභයක් ලැබීමට තමයි අපේ පූර්වකථනය තිබුණේ. ඉතින් මේ තත්ත්වය පිළිබඳව අපි සාකච්ඡා කරා. අපි දන්නවා මිල වැඩිවීම යම් ආකාරයක බලපෑමක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් ඒක කළමනාකරණය කර ගැනීමක් ජනතාවගේ පැත්තෙන් අපහසුයෙන් හෝ සිදු කිරීමට කටයුතු කරන කියන ඉල්ලීම අපි කරනවා.
This has now led to calls by private bus operators for a significant hike in bus fares if diesel subsidies are not forthcoming. They cite daily losses of up to 5,000 rupees for short distance buses. They add that with only 20% of buses currently operating as it is given the diesel shortage, if no relief is provided by the government from Monday onwards, even these few buses may not be able to run. Chairman of the All Island Private Bus Operators Association, Gamanu Vijay Ratna, says that a continuation of services could happen if diesel is supplied to buses through state bus depots at the old prices.
ළංගම දැන්ට ඔය ඩිපෝ වලින් හරහා හෝ ඒ වගේම සම්පාකාර ඩිපෝ වලින් හරහා පෞද්ගලික බස් අතරවලට පැරණි මිලට ඉන්ධන ලබා දෙන්න කටයුතු කරනවා නම් අපි බස් ගාස්තුවක් සංශෝධනය කරන්නේ මේ දේ හෙට වෙනකොට ඉවර වෙන්න ඕන. යම් ආකාරයේ සහනාධාරයක් නොදුන්නොත් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම 15%ක බස් ගාස්තුවකට යන්න අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
Meanwhile, State Minister of Fisheries, Harbour Development and Multi-Day Fishing Activities Kanchana Wijasekara announced that a decision has been taken to provide a higher price to multi-day fishermen for their catches to counteract the rise in fuel prices.
අපනයන කරුවන් සමග සාකච්ඡා කළා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඩොලරයේ අගය වෙනස් වීම තුල ඔවුන්ට ලැබෙන ආදායමෙන් කොටසක් ඍජුවම මේ දීවරයන්ටත් යා යුතුයි. මීට වඩා වැඩි මිලක් ඒ බහුදින යාත්‍රා හිමියන්ට ඔවුන්ගේ මත්ස්‍ය අස්වැන්නට ලබා දෙන ආකාරයට කටයුතු කරන්නත් දීවර සංස්ථාවේ ජාලය හරහා සෑම වරායකම මේ කටයුතු මිලදී ගැනීම සඳහා අපි සමුදා ඉඳලා වැඩපිළිවෙලක් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නත් අපි කටයුතු කරනවා කියන එකත් අපි මේ වෙලාවේ කියනවා.
An agreement has been signed for the setting up of a joint venture company named the Trincomalee Power Company Limited for the development of a 100 megawatt solar power plant in Sampur. The agreement was signed between the Ceylon Electricity Board and the National Thermal Power Corporation Limited of India yesterday.
The Ceylon Electricity Board and the National Thermal Power Corporation Limited of India yesterday signed an agreement for a joint venture to develop a 100 megawatt solar power plant in Sampur. The signing ceremony took place at the Ministry of Finance in Colombo. High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka Gopal Bagle attended the event where the signing took place for the joint venture and shareholders agreement that creates a Trincomalee Power Company Limited for the development of the Sampur solar power plant. During the visit of Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa to India last year, India had resolved to enhance investments in various sectors in the island that would contribute to growth and expand employment. The Indian High Commission in Colombo said in a statement that the Sampur solar power project was to be an important step in this direction and pledged to continue to encourage and facilitate effective implementation of the project. India says that it is committed to expanding the role of renewable energy and helping build cleaner, greener and climate resilient societies, adding that its cooperation with Sri Lanka in this domain will only become stronger with the implementation of a $100 million line of credit for the development of solar power projects.
Now then, a gazette was issued by the central bank on repatriation of export proceeds, making it mandatory to receive the proceeds within 180 days from the date of shipment or provision of services. Further, several payments have been authorised by the central bank for which export proceeds can be used for. New rules on repatriating export proceeds were gazetted yesterday by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. As per the Gazette, it is mandatory to receive the export proceeds in Sri Lanka with respect of all goods exported and services provided outside the country within 180 days from the date of shipment or provisioning of services. Then all related documentary evidence on each and every receipt of export proceeds must be provided to respective licensed commercial bank or a permitted licensed specialised bank that receives such proceeds in Sri Lanka. In the meantime, the utilising of export proceeds has been limited to certain authorised payments. Outward remittances for current transactions related to the particular export of goods and services and withdrawal in foreign currency notes or transfer of funds for travel purposes related to export of goods and services are among the approved payments. Payments of dividends declared to non-resident investors and payments of salaries to expatriate employees who are foreign nationals or dual citizens is also approved. Meanwhile, payments to local suppliers permitted under the provisions of the Foreign Exchange Act No. 12 of 2017 for the purchases related to the particular export of goods and services is also authorised. The Gazette also says that the Director of the Department of Foreign Exchange of the Central Bank shall have the right to initiate action against any non-compliance with or transgression of these rules laid down by the Gazette by any exporter, local supplier or licensed bank. For full details on the Gazette pertaining to export proceeds, log on to AdaDerana.lk. Now then, international media reported yesterday that Sri Lanka's Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa is set to travel to the United States next month to meet with the International Monetary Fund. With Sri Lanka facing its worst ever financial crisis, the reports allege that his visit would be to seek assistance to bring the island out of its current dire straits. The report also says that his visit will be to present a serious recovery plan to the IMF as well. However, Central Bank Governor Jitniwat Cabral took to social media yesterday to refute any rumours of IMF-led debt restructuring, as he had been implied. The IMF is in its periodic review released last week, called on the government to implement a credible and coherent strategy to repay debt and restore macroeconomic stability. According to the IMF, the country faces mounting challenges, including public debt that has risen to unsustainable levels, low international reserves, and persistently large financing needs in the coming years. We will see you shortly on the other side of this break. Bear with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back to First at 9. The Committee on Public Enterprises was surprised to learn that the same entity which represents the owners of the charred feeder vessel MV Express Pearl is also providing consultations to the Marine Environment Protection Authority. The vessel caught fire and sank in Sri Lankan waters in May last year and caused what has since been called the world's worst marine disaster to date. The conflict of interest wasn't the only issue that was unearthed during yesterday's COPE proceedings when MIPA was summoned before the committee, as some internal administrative failings were also brought to focus.
GM සහ ෆයිනෑන්ස් ඩිරෙක්ටර් කියන තුන් දෙනා වැදගත් තමයි. හැබැයි මේ නෛතික වැඩවලට නීති නිලධාරී තමයි ප්‍රධාන ඉන්නේ. මේක ඕගොල්ලෝම එව්වත් කරනවා වගේ ගතියක් මේකේ පේනවා. ලීගල් ඔෆිස් මේවට ගියාද මේ MT එකේ? නිව් ඩයමන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධයෙන් සිවිල් අපරාධ වගකීමට අදාළ කිසිදු සාකච්ඡාවකට සහභාගී වෙන්න. ඇයි අවස්ථාවල මොකද ඔබතුමිය අසනීප වෙලා හිටියද? ඔබතුමිය ගත්තේ නැහැ. ඇයි ඒ ගත්තේ නැත්තේ? MT නිව් ඩයමන්ඩ් සිද්ධිය වෙනකොට අපිට නියෝජ්‍ය නීති නිලධාරීනි කළමනාකාරතුමියක් හිටියා. ඇත්තටම යම්කිසි ආයතනයේ වැඩවලදී මෙතුමියගේ මැදිහත් වීම ඉතාමත් මදි සහ අවශ්‍ය වේගයට සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන කාරණේ මත අපිට දෙවෙනි නිලධාරිය තමයි ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්න ඕනේ. එතනම වැරදි පරිපාලන වශයෙන් වැරදි. දෙවෙනි එහෙමනම් ඔබතුමිය මේ නිලධාරිය ගැන නීතිමය පියවරක් ගන්න ඕන අධ්‍යක්ෂ මණ්ඩලයට දාලා එහෙම නැත් මෙයාව පැත්තකින් තියලා යට ඉන්න නිලධාරියෙක් අරගෙන මේ වාගේ සංවේදී වැඩ කරනකොට මේකේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් ආවොත් එහෙම ඔබතුමිය තමාරු වැටෙනවානේ. ලේකම්තුමාගේ අවධානයට පවා යොමු කරලා තියෙන මේ ගැටලුව ඔබතුමා අහපු විදියට පනත ගැන වුණත් අනිත් රෙගුලාසි ගැන වුණත් අපි දිගින් දිගටම සාකච්ඡා කරුවත් දිගින් දිගටම කැඳෙව්වොත් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපිට ලැබෙන ප්‍රතිචාරය ඉතාමත් අඩුයි. සමහරවිට දෙන ඩොකියුමන්ට් එක නැති වෙනවා. සමහරවිට ෆයිල් කරන්න බැරි වෙනවා. ඔයාගේ පැත්තෙන් මොකද්ද කියන්න තියෙන්නේ? ඔබතුමිය මේ වැඩවලට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්නේ නැද්ද? දැන් 2003 මම මේ අධිකාරියට බැඳුනේ සභාපතිතුමනි එතෙන් සිට අවුරුදු 18ක් සියලුම නඩු කටයුතු මමයි කළේ. නීති දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව සම්බන්ධ මේ නඩු කටයුතු අර මේ ජයග්‍රහණය කරලා තියෙන එකක්වත් පැරදිලා නැහැ. උනාට ඔබතුමියට බැරි වුණානේ අර 2012 දී අර මොකද්ද අර තීන්නේ මොකද්ද ඒක නම් කියවක. ඔව් ඒක නීතිමය නීතිශාස්ත්‍ර පැත්තෙන් සිදුවෙන සියලුම දේවල් සිදු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ වැරදි කිව්ව ජයග්‍රහණය කරා ඔක්කොම කරා කියලා කිව්වන් පස්සේ එකක් ඒ ගොඩක් කියව කියලා නැහැ මේ.
In the meantime, the interim claim in the MV Express Pearl disaster too was taken up at the COPE, especially the first interim claim of $37.4 million. However, the island has only received $3.6 million so far. It was revealed during the proceedings that the International Tank Owners Pollution Federation Limited is providing consultations to the vessel's owners as well as the Marine Environment Protection Authority.
ඔවුන් ඇත්තට මෙන්නේ අපිටත් පිරිසුදු කිරීම සම්බන්ධ උපදෙස් දෙන්න නමුත් නියෝජනය කරන්නේ නෞකාවේ සමාගම. ඉතින් ඒක අපිට මොකක්ද තියෙන සම්බන්ධය ඒගොල්ලෝ? ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලෝනේ මේ අපේ බිල කපන්නේ දිගටම. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලෝ අපිටත් වැඩ කරනවා කියන එකේ තේරුම මොකක්ද? නෑ අපිට උපදෙස් දෙන්නේ වෙරළ පිරිසුදු කිරීම සහ අදාළ අනිත් කාර්යයන් කරන්න ඕන්ට විශේෂඥතාවයක් තියෙනවා තෙල් විසිරීම පාලනය කරන්න සහ ලෝකයේ ඕනම තැනක නෞකා අනතුරක් සිද්ධ වුණාම ඉන්ටර්නැෂනල් ටැන්ක් ඕනර්ස් පොලියුෂන් ෆෙඩරේෂන් කියන මේ ආයතනය තාක්ෂණික සහාය ලබා දෙනවා. ඒක ලෝකෙ කොහෙත් වෙන දෙයක්. හැබැයි සියලුම නෙගෝසියේෂන්ස් නීතිපතිතුමා සහ අධිකරණවතුමා සම්බන්ධ ඒ සමස්ත ලොකු කමිටු ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. ඒ හරහා තමයි යන්නේ. මේකක්වත් අපි නෙගෝෂিয়েට් කරන්නේ ඉන්ඩිවිජුවලි ඒගොල්ලන්ට. මේකේ කොන්ටෙන්ට් නොලෙජ් එක තියෙන්නේ ඕගොල්ලන්ටනේ. අරගොල්ලන්ට තියෙන්නේ ලීගල් නොලෙජ් එකනේ. ලීගල් නොලෙජ් එක නෙමෙයි මම කියන්නේ. දැන් මේ කොන්ටෙන්ට් නොලෙජ් එක මතනේ මේ මුදල් තීරණය වෙන්නේ. ඇත්තටම මේ ඔය අයිසොප් කියන ආයතනය විසින් කපනවා සෑහෙන ප්‍රමාණයක් මේගොල්ලෝ ක්ලේම් කරනවා. ඒ කපන නිසා තමයි මේ අඩු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. මේ අයිටොප් එකට පුළුවන් මේ අපි කරන ක්ලේම් එක මැනිපුලේට් කරන්න. ඒගොල්ලෝ පෙනී ඉන්නේ ටැංක වෙනුවෙන්. අපි වෙනුවෙන් නෙමෙයි. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලෝ තමයි ඒ වෙනුවෙන් නෙගෝෂিয়েට් කරන්නේ. ඒතර අපි මේගොල්ලන්ට එකඟ වෙන එකඟ නොවන ප්‍රමාණය මත තමයි මේක යන්නේ. කාට හරි තර්කයක් ගේන්න පුළුවන් මේගොල්ලොත් එක්ක එකඟ වෙලා මේකේ ගාණ අඩු කරනවායි කියලා. අඩු වෙලක් තියෙනවා ගාණ දිගටම.
Director General of the Institute of National Security Studies, Professor Rohan Gunaratne, says that combating religious extremism cannot only be left up to the country's law enforcement and intelligence agencies, but requires the right political decision to attack it at its very roots. Speaking to Indivari Amuatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, Professor Gunaratne called for a drastic change to what he termed was a broken education system designed along ethnic lines that fails to create true Sri Lankans.
The tragic events of April 2019 were a shock to everyone in Sri Lanka. After its 30-year war came to an end in 2009, the last thing anyone expected was for another serious threat to rear its head just a decade later. Despite seeing the effect of Islamic extremism in the many conflicts in the Middle East, Sri Lanka had been lulled into a false sense of security. But little did we know that beneath the surface, those conflicts thousands of miles away would have a bearing on us. The influence of Islamic extremist groups such as ISIS had for years reached deep within Sri Lanka's own fabric of society. According to Professor Rohan Gunaratne of the Institute of National Security Studies, preventing this is not only the job for the country's law enforcement and intelligence services. It has to be attacked at its very roots.
A much bigger role can be played by the education institutions, the information, the digital institutions, and also by the religious institutions. So fighting religious extremism is not only the task of the Ministry of Public Security and Ministry of Defense. We have to bring in the Education Department, and we have to bring the Department of Muslim Religious Cultural Affairs into the picture.
Speaking further, Professor Gunaratne also called for serious changes to Sri Lanka's education system that he says plays a major part in fostering prejudice and resentment among communities.
Government is making a terrible mistake of continuing with a broken education policy. We don't have a national education policy because our schools are not producing Sri Lankans. They are producing Sinhalese, Muslims and Tamils, and many with prejudices towards each other. So if we want to build this country as Sri Lanka, our education system should produce Sri Lankan. Right now, only our universities are producing Sri Lankans. And of course, Professor Sampath, the UGC chairman, has done a commendable thing by having harmony centers in the 17 universities. But I would like this harmony being practiced at schools, meaning make all schools multilingual, multicultural, multi-ethnic. We can do it. If we don't do it now, we will have prejudice, suspicion, leading to resentment, anger. And we will not have a united Sri Lanka. We'll have a fragmented Sri Lanka.
Professor Gunaratne added that the onus, however, now remains on the Education Minister to provide the political leadership to bring about the necessary reforms, especially with regards to Islamic madrasas.
If we still allow those madrasas teaching only Islam, we will have another attack because the religious extremism came through religion. No one can dispute it. So even the madrasas, we have to make sure that they learn Sinhala, they learn English, they learn about other religions so that they will respect the other religion. They learn mathematics, they learn philosophy, they learn critical thinking. So education is a key to fight exclusivism, because it is exclusivism that leads to extremism, and extremism leads to terrorism.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.